Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, hitting the halfway point. We check in on several key pieces of legislation moving through the roundhouse as the action starts to pick up.
Pretty much all the work ends up happening at the end. You know, we joke that you're halfway through the session, but like 90% of the work is still to be done.
And the newly elected Navajo Nation president reflects on his first month in office and lays out his priorities for the tribe. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. We're past the 30-day mark in the 60-day legislative session, and there are new developments around some of the bills we've been following here on the show. Tuesday, the State House passed House Bill 7, the proposal that would guarantee access to reproductive and gender-affirming health care to anyone in the state. That same night, the House also passed House Bill 4, the Voting Rights Act, which would expand automatic voter registration, allow convicted felons to vote, create a voluntary permanent absentee voter list, and enact the Native American Voting Rights Act. Now, both House Bill 7 and House Bill 4 now advance to the Senate. Earlier this week, the House Taxation and Revenue Committee voted to table a bill that would increase alcohol taxes by 25 cents per drink. The chair of the committee, State Representative Derek Lente, says they'll have to wait and see if a compromise can be reached. All of this is a clear sign that the Capitol is getting busier and busier. We wanted to take this opportunity to check in with Albuquerque Journal Capitol reporter Dan McKay. Dan has been covering the legislature for decades, and as he explains, some of the biggest decisions could go down to the wire. I want to catch up with Dan at this near halfway point. The session ends on March 18th. Dan, real quick, we're going to get you back to work here, but first question, this is our first really sort of in-house session in a long time. Any palpable difference in how legislation is being made compared to, during the COVID time when people were just at home?
Yeah, I'd say it's been a big difference. The building is it's full of people again. That means everything from school kids who are doing performances or coming on class field trips to, lobbyists who are leaving presents on legislators' desks on the floor. And there's a lot of in-person testimony. This is the first session in probably about 3 years that hasn't had any COVID restrictions. There's no vaccine requirement, there's no mask mandate. So people are, there's no limitation on visitors. There was one session where there were almost no visitors allowed in the building. So yeah, it's been a big difference in terms of how it's impacting the legislators. I would say there's maybe a little more, maybe a little easier for them to collaborate and even work across party lines in some cases. I think the legislators are probably getting to know, some of the legislators, they took office in these COVID amid COVID restrictions. So it's kind of been a chance for them also, I think, to get to know some of their colleagues and not see everybody in a mask all the time.
Is this the session or the year we start to modernize our legislature? What's the latest take on things out there? Let me kind of just set it up for the folks out there. There was some recent polling out there that shows there was strong support in every age group for modernizing our legislature, meaning paying legislators, allowing them to have paid staff, and the third one, of course, the big one, going to a full-time legislature in finger quotes. Who knows what that means? It could be 6 months, 4 months, all the year. Where do we stand now? What's the hallway chatter on that? Are folks generally warm to the idea of modernizing, or is the body just sort of protecting itself a little bit here and not moving so quick on this stuff?
Yeah, it really seems to be a priority of Democrats in the House. Democrats have a big majority in the House, well, both chambers, but the House Democrats seem to be a little more interested in it at this point. The debate has been kind of partisan this year. It has not always fallen along partisan lines, but this year it has. Republicans have more or less objected to these proposals. The one that I don't know, maybe has a little more legs at this point is there's a proposal that would lengthen legislative sessions in even years. So in election years, the legislature only meets for 30 days and the agenda is limited. The budget is usually a dominant issue in those sessions. There's a proposal that would expand it to 60 days. So New Mexico would have 60-day sessions every year. proponents say it would, give the legislature a little more time to vet bills. It would provide, 2 opportunities for some of these bills to advance rather than just one every election cycle. That one maybe has a little more, seems to have a little more movement. But it's a little hard to tell this early in the session. There are also proposals dealing with staff, trying to get legislators better staff so that they can better vet bills and have sort of independent analysis rather than relying so heavily on lobbyists. There's also proposals to establish a salary for legislators. Supporters say this would allow a broader pool of people to serve. The legislature now is not entirely unpaid. They do draw per diem. They get some reimbursements. They have a pension system, but they do not draw a salary. And the amounts of money that they get are pretty small. So legislators are constantly talking about how much the job costs them and damages their income from, they have to take a break from their law practice or whatever else they're doing. And consequently, a lot of retired people serve in the legislature. But I would say it's definitely a huge priority for Democrats in the House. A little too early to say whether it's going to gain traction in the Senate. But I have heard a lot of talk about the 60 and 60 option. That is one that may advance.
Is there anything that stands out about this year's sessions? The reason I ask that is down here from Albuquerque, it's hard to get a feel for the room, so to speak, wherever room you happen to be in, committee or whatever. But this year, just something just feels a little different. And reporting on you and your colleague Dan Boyd as well. How are we supposed to kind of consider how these folks are working, or we're just gonna have to wait to the very end to find out what falls through and what makes it? What's your sense of that at this point?
Yeah, everything, pretty much all the work ends up happening at the end. We joke
Right.
that you're halfway through the session, but like 90% of the work is still to be done. I would say, the House has maybe been a little less combative than usual. There have been some leadership changes there. We have a new speaker, Javier Martinez. He's a Democrat from Albuquerque. Brian Egoff didn't run for re-election and left the legislature altogether. On the Republican side, James Townsend was the leader for a few years, and he remains a member of the legislature but decided not to seek re-election. So the partisan makeup of the chamber hasn't really changed. Democrats still have 45 seats, Republicans have 25. But the personalities are different. Ryan Lane, the Republican leader, and Javier Martinez, the speaker, they're both lawyers who are in their early 40s. I think that they maybe that helps them cooperate a little more. It does feel like it's been less combative. We've had fewer debate go sort of the full 3 hours in the House and
Right.
sort of slow everything to a crawl. So it could be that there's maybe a little more collaboration on that side, but we'll have to see how it happens, how it plays out. Obviously, it's going to get more tense and more partisan as we start to face sort of the deadline at the end of the session. But I would say that the atmosphere in the House is maybe a little bit of a change, a little bit of a distinct feature of this session so far.
Hey, Dan, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Have a great day, and we'll catch up with you at the end of the session.
Thanks, Gene.
How many people do you know that are independents and then shut out of our primaries? These folks are engaged, they want to participate, so my bill is simply acknowledging and respecting their affiliation as independents so they can walk into a polling place and vote for a Republican or a Democrat, and incredibly, the world's not going to end.
Now it's time to welcome our line opinion panelists for the week to talk about some developing legislation on education. We're happy to be joined in studio by Dave Mulryan. He's president of Mulryan Nash Advertising. Andy Lyman to his left, he's a reporter at the Santa Fe Reporter. And across the table, that's Merritt Allen of Vox Optima Public Relations, one of our regulars. Thank you all for being here. Now, lawmakers at the Roundhouse are considering a proposal that would bring back a state board of education to New Mexico. Currently, the state has a public education department and a secretary, of course, who is appointed by the governor. The proposed resolution would remove the secretary position and create a 15-member board of education with 10 elected members and 5 members appointed by the governor. Now, that group of 15 would then hire a state soup or superintendent, to lead the public education department. If approved, this would return the state to a public education model. New Mexico held Dave Mulryan for 5 decades before voters removed the board in 2003. Buyer's remorse here? What's going on here? Why the big turnaround?
Well, but the 50 years had fewer, superintendents or people in charge than the last 4 years.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
I think that one of the things that's clear is who's ever been appointed, for whatever reason, it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, you have to pitch it. I mean, you have to say. And we have not seen in those 4 years, or however long this legislation has been here, we have not jumped up. We have not, I think we even fell one below Mississippi, if that's possible. That's right. We have not improved our education system. So listen, there should be no remorse about pitching it because it doesn't work. So, that's very clear.
Merritt, interesting. Dave mentioned we've had 3 different cabinet secretaries over the past 4 years plus. You got to have continuity, especially in education and how people kind of see these things. Is this the solution? Is it to go this way?
I really like this. It also, I think, points back to more local control.
Yep.
And I think the next reform that New Mexico has to consider is looking at the number of school districts we have. We have 86 school districts, and a third of our students are all in one.
Right.
That makes no sense.
That's right.
So we've got tiny, tiny school districts and a mega school district. And so allocating resources equitably that way just is awkward and obviously isn't working well. And our largest school district is not our top performing school district by a long shot.
Isn't that interesting? I want to come back to that as well. That's an interesting point. Andy, we're 50th in public education. As Dave mentioned, we fell a spot from 49th to 50th. Could the argument be made that the change in 2003 was a turning point for the state? Are we looking for a moment to scapegoat here? Because as Dave and Merritt mentioned, we've not appreciably done anything better since we went to this 2003 scheme.
Yeah, I think it's hard to, I don't know that if I guess you could point to that and sort of flesh out whether changes started at that moment. I do remember in 2013 this happened, or there was an attempt here, but it was sort of pointed at former Governor Susana Martinez's cabinet secretary, Hannah Scandera.
Right.
And I think it's interesting that this is getting some more traction, sort of bipartisan traction, considering that before it was like, oh, we just don't like this secretary, we're going to try to change it up.
Right.
But at that time too, it was kind of like, hey, remember we just got to this, right? It's sort of, I don't know, in the whole scheme of things, we're sort of still new in this cabinet secretary thing, right? 20 years, I guess, is not that new, but it's sort of considering how long it was before that. But I do think it's not going away, right? I think people are going to keep bringing this up even if it doesn't happen this year.
Right. People want results, Dave. They want results. Right.
But also, number one school district in the country, either Massachusetts or New Jersey, they tend to swap, They spend, 3 or 4 times what we spend in New Mexico. Although I don't think our budgets are really, that bad. I think it's a matter of political will. How do we change this and say, it's like UNM. UNM has a 50% dropout rate. It's the cornerstone. Eastern New Mexico University, we lose 70% of all people before they graduate. So education starting from the very beginning until, college is lousy. There's just no other way to put lipstick on that pig. And
yeah, Andy, when you think about it, I don't understand how we've not made a move on this beforehand. And now we've got this number, we've got 15 different people, but with more people, there's more problems. When you got more ideas. Is that a concern? Not for you personally, but just watching how mechanics of New Mexico politics work. You get a group of people in a room, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get better ideas at the end of the day.
No, but I think there's an argument that you get a better thought process, right? Where it doesn't end up just one person answering for the decisions. Right. I think there's a bunch of other states. Actually, my uncle was on the Board of Education in Alaska, same thing, right? And you do get a mix of people in there. And I think maybe sometimes you might get enough people that it sways one direction, but I do think it looks maybe somewhat a little bit better than instead of, the old adage, the buck stops here, which is good for a lot of things. But I think if you can't sway that one person's, that being the cabinet secretary, their mind on something, maybe we do need some more folks in there to sort of pitch some other ideas.
Interesting point, Merritt, I want to talk with you about, everybody, I suppose. There is a bill right now that would have members of school boards disclose campaign donations and, more importantly, be trained on things like finance and budgeting and things of that nature. I'm interested in your thought on that. It seems like a really good idea. I mean,
I don't know that the state needs to get involved in local school boards. I'm not a huge fan of that because I don't feel like the state's done a good job at the state level with education. Now, I think local school boards, we've had some egregious situations with local school boards. Right. And I understand that, but I think that's up to the voters to fix. That's why you have elected school boards. Right. So I think the state offering resources that local school boards can take advantage of, but I think mandating I think that's kind of state overreach. That's my mindset. Yeah. And if you feel that your local school board member is not trained or fit for the job, then vote them out.
Right. It's the before or after, what Merritt's saying. You got to have something coming in the door. You can't be just a blank sheet and get trained to be
Without a doubt, but also a politician always looks for some sort of procedure, the election or whatever. How do we help improve that? Because that's going to improve the quality of the politician. I'm not sure that's true, but, but I think Merritt's point, where we have one huge Bernalillo County school system and then all these smaller ones, needs to be taken into account, And I think if we're going to look for a solution, maybe Bernalillo County has its own schools board, and the rest of them are grouped together, so there's some amount of parity. I don't know. We need, but I think we should try things that are new and unusual because whatever we've done hasn't worked. I mean, there's no question.
Right. I mean, does Grant County need 2 school districts?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Exactly right. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let me go back to this donations thing. I'm kind of interested in this, Andy. It's interesting. Currently, districts with more than 12,000 students, speaking of size, are required to report donations. And that only applies to 4 of the state's 89 school districts. Something's bizarre with that. I mean, is it everybody or nobody at this point? What's the best way to handle this?
I read an interesting take on, that their donations in those smaller districts don't come the same way that they come for the larger districts.
Okay.
From what I've seen and covered, I think we might be more worried about how those board members got the position in the first place, or what sort of, because you're in those smaller districts, we have a list of stories, we can go back years of a cousin or brother or, hired a superintendent to do things. And I don't know, I don't cover the smaller districts that much, so I don't know where the money's coming from. But yeah, I mean, I sort of lean on that I don't know that they're getting a whole bunch of money from outside interests like you do in Bernalillo County or Santa Fe County.
That's an interesting point. No one's really proved that point to this date, that there's some kind of problem with these donations. I appreciate them trying to get ahead of something before the problem happens. But Merritt, interestingly, the president of the New Mexico School Board Association and a member of the Lovington School Board told the Journal that the measure was, quote, punitive. And if you want to know who donates in a small community, go to the post office, go to the coffee shop, it's there. That's a great quote, first of all. Is she right?
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I don't see where the Colfax County, digging deep into Colfax County school board donations is going to give you a smoking gun.
Right.
I don't, and it's just simply a matter of going to Walmart and finding out. I don't think they have a Walmart in Colfax County.
Probably
you have to
not.
go, probably Lovington County.
Exactly.
You go,
Right.
going to Walmart, you would.
Yes,
in Lovington.
Right. Exactly right. David, is this a hammer to kill a fly, as they say? I mean, the president of the board said, the school board said it's punitive. I'm not quite sure what she means by that. But,
maybe, but also I think it's a solution in search of a problem. I don't think that bad school performance is somehow related to donations. That seems like to me a bit of a disconnect.
Yeah.
And I think that, we need to be looking at what can we do to improve our schools from the bottom up. And, everything from, teachers, and I don't know, and I think it's a lack of leadership.
Complicated.
Yeah,
That's right.
it's a lack of leadership from from state legislators, from school boards, from the governor, from everybody. Because if we don't fix this problem, then where are we going? Are we,
right.
are we happy to stay 50th?
The future of New Mexico you're talking about.
Right.
Exactly right. Yeah. Thanks to our line opinion panel for that. We'll be back in about 16 minutes to discuss the governor's latest executive order. If you haven't heard about this and how it will change the state's Children, Youth, and Families Department.
Representative Figueroa, thank you so much for talking to us on this Ash Wednesday. You are sponsoring some measures that attempt to professionalize government in a few different ways. One of them, modernizing the legislature. What's the goal here?
The end goal in several of the modernization measures is to make us more efficient and more inclusive and allow us to do the work that the people of New Mexico need us to do.
And you're not doing that now?
We are attempting to do that now in the framework that we have, but adjustments can be made to make it more efficient. And these are things we have not looked at in many, many years. The length of the session, for example, has not been changed since the 1960s. And if you think about how different the world is, Medicare hadn't been invented. Our whole health system in terms of science and distribution and affordability has drastically changed, even in the last 20 years, much less compared to 1960. So the complexity of the issues we are debating and making policy about demand more time.
Are we talking full-time or?
Well, House Joint Resolution 2 proposes that we extend the session to be, instead of 60 and then the next year 30 days, that it is 60 days each year. So we have that additional 30 days to debate and to deliberate.
Does that mean that in even-numbered years you would only be looking at the budget for 60 days?
No, it would mean in that even-numbered year, it would be open and not limited to the budget.
So, I think people say sometimes spending more time on this isn't going to make this any better. Why do we need more time in the session? I mean, can't you get it done in 30 days every other year?
Well, there are arguments pro and con, but I would posit that time is one of the parameters that limit the thoughtfulness of our debate and the depth of our research and our ability to hear from our constituents. Because we have so little turnaround time, we need to know what they want from us. And 60 days gives them a broader window to read the bills and to give us feedback.
So there's another measure that would go to the voters, ask them to approve a commission to set salaries for lawmakers. We've been talking about this for a long time, right? So why do we need to pay lawmakers? Why do you think so?
Well, every time I have a town hall, at least one of my constituents says, when are we going to pay our legislators? They see it as a way for us to be more accountable to them. If we're paid, they can ask more of us. And that's reasonable. They know right now we're volunteers. They know that between 9 to 5, there are some of us they can't reach for 10 months of the year. And they want us more accessible to them. And they want us to be able to do a better job. The other piece that might actually be just as important, if not more, is that if we're paid, we can include more voices. There are whole swaths of people, working class people, who can't consider running for the legislature. Their voices are not heard here because there is no salary here. And if we want to bring those voices in, we have to find a way to pay a salary.
Now, the third measure that we're looking at has to do with school boards and campaign finance. What do you want to do?
Shine a light on school board practices. Most of our school boards across this state, and there are 89 of them, are doing fabulous, amazing work. But there are a couple issues we could tweak. One, for example, is campaign contributions. As the world of money in politics has changed, we need to illuminate even more where the money comes from. And right now, only 4 school districts in the state are large enough. Actually, Santa Fe just shrank in enrollment, so only 3 are large enough to meet the criteria that requires campaign finance reports. There's an exclusion that says if your district is smaller than 12,000, you don't have to report. So we want to eliminate that because every New Mexican deserves to see where money is coming from in their candidates' campaigns.
Senator Schmades, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Oh, you're welcome, Gwyneth.
You are facing some heavy opposition to some good government bills that you are supporting this session. One of them would open the primaries. And this is different from some other proposals we've seen. How does yours work?
Well, mine creates a fully open primary. So regardless of your political registration status, you get to show up and they say, what ballot do you want? Do you want a Republican primary? Do you want a Democrat primary? Here you go. Your registration status really doesn't matter.
Now, we have heard opposition saying, you know, people need to get involved with the party. They have to show that they are devoted, that they are involved. What do you say to that?
Well, I'd say these are the people that have created this monopoly or duopoly in American politics, right? So a lot of people in the middle feel boxed out, they feel disenfranchised and disillusioned from our just two-party form of government, right? And so they say hop on board with our way of doing things, and that's not what people want to do.
So, you know, for example, this would allow Democrats to vote in your primary election. Are you worried about them coming in and voting for a candidate who's much more liberal than you?
No, not at all. You know, I don't have that worry. I think it has the potential to even moderate things. And I don't see a widespread, you know, concerted effort to do those things. If someone really wants to give up their opportunity to vote in a Democrat primary to vote Republican, well, let them do that.
You're also asking to see more information from lobbyists about what they're up to. What do you want to do?
Well, we have two bills to just blow the door wide open in politics here. It would be amazing. So the first bill would require lobbyists to disclose which specific piece of legislation they're lobbying for or against. The second bill would also require them not only to disclose that information, but how much money they're being paid to either push a certain bill or to kill a piece of legislation.
Now, I'm sure some of the, opposition to this is that it's too complicated. It's too difficult to figure out, to report that. Does it have to be in real time?
It would have to be before the close of the session, and it's not difficult. The Secretary of State's office already has all this software to track all of our financial things and all those matters, so it's really not too much of a lift, I don't think.
Wouldn't this just allow you to say, oh, I see what the oil and gas lobby is lobbying for. I'm just going to say yes, 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 right down the list?
It would help legislators know where the special interest is. Is it out of state? Is it in state? Which industries are pushing it? Which industries are against it? And it would allow the public to know. I mean, it would be great, I think.
Senator O'Neill, thank you so much for talking to us today.
My pleasure, Gwyneth.
You have been a supporter of open primaries for at least a decade.
Yes.
Right? You have a bill that would open primaries up a little bit, and it passed the Senate. Now it goes to the House. What is your prognostication?
Okay. Even though we had this amazing vote in the Senate, 28-10, bipartisan, just a very interesting who was with who and who was against with who, the House historically, recently, just not really liked this bill very much. So we have a real challenge to get it through the House. But I'm very proud of the fact that we got it through the Senate. I had people texting me saying congratulations, this is historic and so forth. So I think the time has come. Look, the deal is, what are we afraid of? The people will actually vote? Oh my God, gee whiz. Honestly, everybody knows that DTS voters, the younger folks, they don't get out of college and go, I am a Republican, oh, I'm a Democrat. No, they tend to avoid that label and they register as independents, not just younger people. I'm told that Army veterans are like 50% of them are independents. I mean, how many people do you know that are independents and they're shut out of our primaries? And in these days of quite extreme lack of competitive districts, the primary is even more important than it has been. So these folks are engaged, they want to participate. So my bill is simply acknowledging and respecting their affiliation as independents so they can walk into a polling place and vote for a Republican or a Democrat. And incredibly, the world's not going to end.
Thanks for that piece, Gwyneth. Online right now, we have an extra online-only segment of The Line where I ask our panelists about some of those good governance and modernization bills. You can watch that discussion online right now on the New Mexico in Focus YouTube page. Now, as newly elected legislators get their footing at the Roundhouse, the Navajo Nation has welcomed a new leader. Dr. Bu Nygren has passed the 30-day mark in his first year in office as president of the Navajo Nation. The tribe spans parts of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. It has the largest reservation in the country. No small task for the youngest president in the history of the tribe. Dr. Nygren ran on a number of campaign promises, including lifted COVID-19 restrictions and fully reopening the Navajo Nation. NMAF correspondent Antonia Gonzalez caught up with President Nygren to ask about that action and what he's learned in his short time leading the tribe.
President Nygren, thank you for joining me.
Yes, it's an honor to be here with you.
And last time we spoke, you were at a flea market, campaigning on the campaign trail. Now you're back at it on the move, but now you're president of the Navajo Nation. How's it going so far?
I am 38 days on the job, end of today, and it's been super exciting. It's been everything that I wish I've dreamed about being as president, because you get to lead the Navajo Nation in a way that you set the pace for the future of our nation. So the past 38 days, I've done a lot of traveling. I've met with a lot of leaders. I've met with all three governors, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah governors, all the state senators, the state representatives, the U.S. representatives, and U.S. senators as well from all the three states as well too. So it's been an exciting couple of weeks, and also at the same time really maintaining what I promised my campaign was working with the Navajo Nation Council and making sure that I am in communication with them and doing my best to make sure I align myself with them as far as priorities. So anything that I talk about or present about, I've been very transparent about getting that information back over to the Navajo Nation Council as well. And the other thing I also did was my first week to Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. I was actually the guest of Senator Mark Kelly at the State of the Union. So that was pretty exciting, coming from a place where I've never been to Washington, D.C. I think the last time I was there, I believe I was in high school. So this time around, it was exciting to go to the State of the Union, also be invited for a meeting inside the White House. So that was all everything that I've been thinking about. One of the things that we did do is make sure that we lift the mask mandate, because I felt like it was about time. All the surrounding communities have reopened, all the surrounding cities have reopened, and we just took precautionary and made it optional for people to wear a mask. So a lot of things like that. And I've signed 2 legislations so far. One was for emergency response with the storms that have come in, to make sure that we replenish at the chapter level, to make sure they do have some emergency funding. The second one I signed was for some fire trucks and ambulances. So it's been an exciting couple of weeks, very, very action-packed. And the theme of all my visits has always been the same: roads, water, broadband, better public safety, and jobs.
And as you put together your administration, you appointed many Navajo women, including your vice president. And even in the tribal council, there's a historic number of Navajo women serving on the tribal council. So why is it important to you for Navajo women to be part of the government leadership?
That's been for some reason, they've all worked out the way I thought it was, because I look at everything based on competency, compassion, and teamwork. And everybody that has come to the top most of them have been female. My cabinet is made up of some pretty strong Navajo women, and I believe that they're more than capable, and they've kept my balance. Even my chief legal counsel is a strong, independent woman too, as well. So it's I think it's just my belief in just making sure the best people are in place, and at this moment in time, those types of people are in those positions. Because the reason why I really have pushed the most qualified people is just because there's over $1 billion worth of projects, the ARPA projects, and citizen projects that have been on the books for a long time, and we have a short timeline to get those dollars spent. So right now, my teams are very focused on coming up with creative ways to spend those dollars, and some of those issues that have come up my way, I've definitely relayed that back to Secretary Holland that we really need help streamlining some of the requirements to get some of these infrastructure and essential projects completed. So we're constantly in contact with them because I know construction season is upon us. So we want to try to get dollars out there so people can have some jobs for the summer and into the fall.
What is one of your next upcoming goals or plans as you move forward and as president of the Navajo Nation?
I think my main focus, not only is it getting those dollars, but something internally that's been a big struggle is hiring and getting people through the tribal bureaucracy to get somebody hired, because there's scenarios where it takes someone 2 to 3 months to get hired on the Navajo Nation. By the time they're waiting on getting hired, they find a brand new job and opportunities leave like that. So my main focus is to the goals I've set for all division directors is we need to come up with solutions to get somebody hired within 2 weeks, just like the way the outside does it, or even outside governments get people hired within 2 weeks. We should have that same set of standards. And at the same time, housing has been a big forefront for trying to recruit people. So I'm definitely trying to task my teams to housing opportunities for medium income types of jobs. So I'm looking forward to approaching the Navajo Nation Council on some housing development projects for employees, even if it's just a studio. I think a lot of people would appreciate that.
Well, with that, just any closing words for the younger generation who, are leaders now. There are a lot of young Navajo people who are doing great things on and off the reservation. So any words to our young Navajo people out there?
I think that my number one thing is continue to believe that you can make a difference and come home to help our people in our communities, because I think that there was times when people ask me, Boo, how is a construction guy ever going to come back to the Navajo Nation and lead our people and be president of the Navajo Nation? And deep down in my heart, I knew that my skill set and my belief and commitment to try to help was going to find a way and a path to be president. And I feel like if you're listening, don't let someone hold you down or tell you otherwise. As long as you yourself are centered and believe in the mission that you can help our communities, keep that going and move along, because like myself, I come from a very small community of Red Mesa, and I'm now the president of the Navajo Nation. So you can definitely get it done.
It's time to welcome back our panelists for our final discussion on the show. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham signed an executive order this week that will shake up the Children, Youth, and Families Department. The order includes a reorganization of the department, one that is meant to, quote, elevate personnel in charge of protective services, behavioral health, and juvenile justice, end quote. Now, the action creates an Office of Innovation dedicated to researching new best practices and establishing a new advisory council for that department. The executive order follows 2 reports filed months ago that cited a series of problems at CYFD. Merritt, I know you've been on this. It's something you've been following closely for years now. What was your reaction to this announcement? Are lawmakers and others had in mind when it comes to making serious changes to CYFD? Is this what it's going to take, an executive order like this?
No, this executive order, and I never disagree with you, Gene, but it shakes up nothing.
Okay.
This executive order promotes some people to higher middle management positions. Right. It does not address the fact that entry-level caseworkers who have to have a bachelor's and 2 years experience make the same as Amazon and Target warehouse workers. Right. It does not address that children spend the night in CYFD offices and do not have a suitable overnight facility that's safe to sleep in. It does not address the fact that foster parents or parents have no place to make a complaint and have it independently adjudicated.
That's interesting.
And the administration is very against that. Yeah. And to me, this is a way to forestall that.
Okay.
And because there is some language about an independent unit within the agency. Well, if it's within the agency, it's not independent, even if you say it is. This,
What do you- what do
this
you
to
m-
me is
Good.
words.
Is it okay? Interesting.
It's
Interesting.
not
I'm gonna-
resources.
I've got a specific question for you in a quick second about that. That's actually very interesting. David, interestingly, the new advisory council prioritizes members with personnel experience with the CYFD system, or are we looking at brand new people? What's the best way to go here? Institutional knowledge counts for something.
It does, you know, and again, to me, it's the same thing as the school board. We keep doing these things that don't work. So again, we're going to try. But if I were the politicians in the legislature, I would take a very serious look at all of this. They are funding this that isn't working, and these are the most vulnerable people in the state. They don't vote, they don't raise money. They need to be looked after, and these legislators are the people that are sort of responsible for looking after them. That's right. And I don't know, I think they're failing, and they need to take their responsibility seriously and look at what is going wrong with this thing and what has gone wrong for 20 to 30 years? Is that how long it's been since this has been effective? I mean, I know a lot of it's related to drug addiction and mental health and all these kinds of things, but it should be fixable. And I think somebody's got to say, we're going to fund this, we're not going to fund this, and that's the legislature from where I see it.
Interestingly, Andy, we're looking for a shakeup here, but the person at the top is in good shape, according to the governor. That would be, of course, Barbara Vigil, the CYFD secretary. Is it possible to really get systemic change and true change when it's the same person at the top? And I'm not saying you to comment if she's good or bad. Just that idea. Does it have to be completely top to bottom? You're gonna make a
Well, I
change?
mean, I think there's an argument that she is still relatively new to this, right? She was brought in to sort of make some changes.
Right.
Overall, I don't know. I mean, I think we've been talking about this for years, right? Going back multiple administrations. I don't know. It's hard to say whether the whoever is in charge is really going to make a huge difference. I think there's a lot of institutional changes. Maybe it is from top down.
Right.
But yeah, I would argue that she is relatively new still.
Interested in your opinion on that. I mean, again, you don't hear a lot of complaints about her specifically when it comes to it, but she is at the top of this dysfunctional, using the governor's word, organization. If it's dysfunctional, why would you keep the person that's running a dysfunctional organization?
I almost wonder if behind the scenes she might not be preparing CYFD for federal receivership. I don't know. Because there's so much
That's come up
wrong
before
with
in
this
years
agency.
past. Yeah.
But I was so shocked with the first independent review report from the Kevin S. settlement and how poorly CYFD had done. There were, I think, 9 of 60-some requirements. 60-some requirements, only 9 CYFD was fulfilling from this 2020 settlement. So there's so much wrong there, and I think it's a very fair argument with people who are very, very pro-life when people will say you're so concerned about the child until it's born and then you don't want to take care of it. But we have a governor who pledged in her campaign to put $10 million in the 2024 budget in for a state-funded abortion clinic, yet she won't pledge any money for an overnight facility for at-risk children. She won't pledge any money in the budget for really an appropriate commensurate wage for entry-level caseworkers, which are so badly needed. You have to question that.
Right.
And why didn't she do this at the same time during her campaign?
Right. An interesting point there. I want to stay with you on this one. The order also calls for the state to contract an out-of-state legal firm to create an annual independent audit of the department. We don't do that already? I mean, something about that seems pretty basic.
Well,
what would that do? What would that accomplish in your mind's eye?
How would that be different from the independent group that's already reviewing the Kevin S. settlement? Which goes through all the things CYFD already isn't doing, did not do in 2021 and 2022. So I don't know what this outside law firm would do that would be different from that. We're already paying for that.
Good point there. I was curious about that myself. Dave, this new advisory council will consist of 7 members, each serving a 3-year term, so we'll start with that, and must represent one of several groups: service providers, foster care representatives, youth advocacy representatives, lawyers, behavioral health providers, and family members with experience in the CYFD system. Each member of the council will be approved by the state Senate. Any problems with that? Length of tenure,
I mean,
amount of people?
Yeah,
you
what
know?
immediately comes to my mind is, paralysis by analysis. I mean, we're setting up another committee. And, to what Meredith is talking about, the most information we get about what's going on at the CYFD is from court settlements. They become a matter of public record and we can read them. And that is not good. I don't think setting up this thing. Okay, so let's say, okay, that's a good idea. When is it going to be set up by? Is there a date for that? I don't know. I didn't read it, but and who's choosing these people exactly? The state senate? Do they have to be, verified? I mean, we're halfway through the session. Are they going to get it done this session? Are they going to do it out of the session? Lots of questions. I again, to me, putting lipstick on a pig, which just never sits well with me.
Let's go back to the situation that Merritt mentioned, the Kevin S. settlement, in case folks are not familiar with that. That is the letter S with a period. That's a 2018 lawsuit, Andy, brought against the state by 14 foster children, claimed the state was, quote, locking New Mexico's foster children into a vicious cycle of declining physical, mental, and behavioral health, end quote. You got to think about, there's a lot of Kevin S's out there. That's what really hurts here. And, how do we, get this to move forward? If the governor wants to do a top-down rebranding, literally, or strip this down to its core, where do we start? Is it, as Merritt says, with more personnel? Is it more money, as Merritt said as well? Something seems missing here.
I think it's sort of an all of the above, everything, right? I mean, it's money, it's resources of varying degrees. One thing, when you mentioned the folks that were supposed to be on that advisory council, right? One of the things that caught my attention reading that was people that have been through the system before.
Right.
And I wonder if that means a lot of different things, right? Or it could mean a lot of different things. But is that somebody who is a success story in here? Is that somebody who, there's also instances where CYFD has overcorrected in the past, right? Where you've got families who are being, for lack of a better term, harassed for their kids missing too much, for family vacations, for illnesses, and once you're in the system, you're in the system, right? You've got a case opened on you. So is it those people? And I don't know. I mean, I don't know who the best person to be in that situation is, or that position. But also, is it just sort of window dressing? Is it saying, we've got somebody on here, and how much input do they have? I don't know. But yes, to go back to your original question, I think it is all of the above that needs to be fixed at CYFD.
Want to get this in, Merritt. Interesting point here. Republican lawmakers have pushed for further changes to the department, pushing a Senate bill that would create an independent accountability office. Do they have something going here? Is there something better than what's being proposed, or?
Absolutely, and I think there's bipartisan support for this. I sent a clip to everybody. Senator Joseph Cervantes last night. I mean, he's just had it.
Yeah.
This is on his last nerve.
Right.
And there was created, former Representative Rebecca Dow created the Child Welfare, I think it's the Early Childhood Caucus, and CYFD was a big part of that caucus's focus, and I think that caucus is still present, and Senator Crystal Diamond has really taken up this cause. And she is working across the aisle, and of course that's key given the makeup of the legislature, and there are so many breaks in the system, and this legislation has to go forward. It seems the administration does not support it, and
Isn't that interesting?
And that is so surprising to me, because so much of this, all of this, was inherited, and this could have been a real win for this administration. And so I find it just such a surprise, given the budget surpluses that were in place and the real opportunity to make good on this, that this is just such a missed opportunity. And there's still an opportunity to pull a win out of this, and this executive order is not a win.
And your point's well taken. It's going to take a full 8-year run if they had started in year 1 to get to someplace. You can't turn this around in 2 years or 3 years. It's going to be difficult. Thanks again to our line panel as always this week. Be sure to let us know what you think about any of the topics these folks covered on our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages, and catch any episode you might have missed on the PBS app or your Roku or smart TV. But we end our show tonight with a push from our young people to protect our state's environment. Under a Democratic governor, the state of New Mexico has been moving forward on commitments to address climate change, But the state is also the second largest oil producing state in the nation, accounting for more than 11% of U.S. crude production. Now, that development, particularly in the Permian Basin, is responsible for vast amounts of greenhouse gas emissions, both in the production phase itself and in the downstream use of petroleum. So this week, our Land senior producer Laura Paskus talks with youth activist Jonathan Juarez Alonso about what the New Mexico No False Solutions Coalition is asking of our political leaders.
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Yucca was among the members, a huge list of members who sent a letter to Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham last month in January, calling for this science-based climate justice legislation and policy. And y'all emphasize in that letter the need to be addressing immediately the greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the need to stop production.
Exactly. So, and that's what has been our biggest battle with legislation that we're seeing coming up right now is, while it might, in some perspective, not in ours, but in some perspectives, if you look at it, just as our local carbon footprint here as a state, in some circumstances, we see emissions going down, but when we include the downstream emissions, all of the emissions created from what's produced and extracted here in New Mexico, that's where the bigger picture is. Because, as I'm sure you know, we recently, in the past year or so, we passed North Dakota, and we are now second in the country for oil and gas production. And so, that letter that you referred to, it called on the governor to follow the science and to propose science-based solutions. And specifically, what that means is the IPCC just said that in order to keep greenhouse gas emissions below where we need to keep them, we need to phase out all existing infrastructure no later than 2034, and no new infrastructure can be approved. And we're very far from that here in New Mexico, unfortunately.
Yeah. So some of the things you're talking about and some of the things in the letter, could arguably be said are pretty radical. And yet, in early February, the United Nations Secretary Antonio Guterres, who's, arguably like the world's top diplomat, said, "We need disruption to end the destruction. No more baby steps, no more excuses, no more greenwashing, no more bottomless greed of the fossil fuel industry and its enablers." So it seems to me like this coalition and, sort of like literally the top diplomat in the world, you're talking about the same things. And yet I'm wondering, as you've presented these ideas and requests to lawmakers, what has their response been to this need to stop fossil fuel production?
It's been pretty mixed. We have some of our climate champions that are right there with us and saying, there can't be any more baby steps. This is something that we've known about for decades, and the fact that we've, procrastinated real action, 30 plus years now, that's why we're in the situation that we are in today. And so, we have, our climate champions, like we said. We have, unfortunately, a lot of moderate Democrats that come from very mixed districts that, there is a lot of dependency in our state on the oil and gas industry. But that's one of the narratives that we're really trying to, bring light to, because when we talk about these communities that rely on oil and gas, it's easy to get caught up or, a little blown away by the numbers or by the money. But when we look at quality of life and when we look at the health impacts that these communities are facing as a result of, some of these families down in the South, they're third and fourth generation oil and gas families, that it isn't even a question. Some of our students in our state in the South, they don't even consider college because they know the second that they graduate, they're going to go right into the field because that's what their father did and their father's father and their father's father's father. And, to really break that narrative that it's not about the money, it's about the impacts that it's having on our people that are working these jobs, and the bigger picture, the impacts that it's having here in New Mexico in terms of climate, but as I said, with downstream emissions, across the entire world.
So can I ask how old you are?
I'm 20.
20, okay. So I was hoping that we could talk a little bit about sort of the way that your generation faces climate change. You know, when you think about your future, when you think about sort of the weight of what's happening, how do you think that maybe you feel differently about it than say me or my parents?
I think that there's a lot of fear and uncertainty because for so long we've just been talking about this as it's like, you know, some maybe not too far off, but still a distant future reality that there's going to be catastrophes forcing millions, potentially billions of people to relocate and become climate refugees. And, you know, that's not something that's really, it's not the same perspective, I would say, for my generation, because we're seeing it in real time. We're seeing, you know, the California wildfires. We saw wildfires here in New Mexico that are, you know, record-setting. We've seen, you know, the Australian wildfires just a couple of years ago. And on top of that, you know, we look at the flooding, we look at droughts, and every indication of science and the vast majority of science across the world, scientists across the world are telling us that, you know, it is code red. This is the sixth mass extinction event, and it's no longer in the distant, it's here.
As a youth activist, what do you wish that New Mexicans better understood about the climate crisis and about the ways in which we can support youth activists?
Yeah, so I think, you know, some of the biggest things are just understanding that, like I said, this isn't something that's, you know, a near future event that's going to, you know, wreak havoc. It's already happening. We talk to our community members, you know, in the north that have already seen these cataclysmic wildfires. We talk to our community members in the south that are dealing with flooding and with continued drought, and, you know, and our farmers, and everyone is feeling it. It's not something that we can deny anymore. And I think, you know, what everyone can do is just continue to call on our elected officials and those in power to follow the science. You know, there's a million and one ways to twist climate politically, but if you look at the science is clear. And like I said, we can't afford to implement any new fossil fuel infrastructures. It's unfortunate. We've really put ourselves in a position where the fossil fuel oil and gas industry, it has an economic chokehold on the rest of our state. We can't seem to get away, we can't seem to pass anything because no one wants to bite the hand that feeds them. No one wants to mess with the number one largest, biggest source of revenue in the state of New Mexico. But the reality is that we have no choice, and we are at the perfect time because we have over $1 billion surplus because of that industry. We should be investing that money in the research and technology it's going to take to transition our economy, and make sure that they're held accountable too, because they got us into this problem to begin with. And like I said, just acknowledging the role that the fossil fuel industry has had.
Well, Jonathan, thanks for being here with me today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Laura, Gwyneth, and Antonia for your work this week. And thank you for joining us and for staying informed and engaged. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the viewers like you.